That's right. Welcome to the bottom of the rabbit hole. I want to thank everybody who's here for joining us for this Matrix University live session. We've got our resident advisor and archivist here with us, Vesuvius MXO.
Greetings, Red Pills.
And a couple days ago, or maybe even yesterday, this conversation came up specific to the Matrix Online, and prior to that, Vesuvius mentioned this topic and applied it to the Matrix universe overall, and I thought it was a great topic for discussion. And I can't think of a better guest to have than the Matrix Online guru, hands down. And that topic is what is considered canon in the Matrix universe. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of freestyle this thing. I mean, it's not really scripted, but like I said, Vesuvius is one of the well-known experts on these kind of things. So we're just going to kind of run down the different installments of Matrix media, from the films to the comics to the different video games. So oh yeah, and that's the other thing. This is, it's like almost 3 a.m. here, Eastern Standard Time. But I have never used StreamYard before, so bear with me as I work out these noob kinks. I thought it would also be a good opportunity for the overseas viewers and overseas listeners to get an opportunity to participate, because I know the other live streams I did were all during the daytime, New York time. So hopefully we'll have some fun here late night. But I do think this is an important topic to cover, because this conversation's been coming up a lot, and I don't know that anybody's talked about this. Have you seen anybody cover this?
No, I see a lot of buzz on Twitter regarding basically the Matrix Online. I guess there's still a community out there for that, and I think that's really the biggest question.
Yeah. So okay. So let's not start with that. Let's give some people a minute to join us here. I see a couple people jumped in the chat here, and don't be shy. We'll try to get to questions if there are questions in the chat as we see them come in. Like I said, just bear with me as I navigate through the StreamYard software for the first time here. But yeah, let's get rolling here. Well, I'll give it another 5 seconds. We'll be at the 3-minute mark, and then class is officially in session. So what do you want to start with? Well, let me quote the Oracle, and let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. So, of course, the original Matrix, Reloaded, and Revolutions are canon. I don't know that anybody's going to dispute that.
Yeah.
So what do you want to jump into next then? I mean, because timeline wise, like I was debating, I feel like Enter the Matrix, the video game, and the Animatrix are kind of running neck and neck here. So
I say we go into Animatrix.
All right, let's go with the Animatrix then. So that's the other film. It's for anybody who doesn't know by now at Matrix University, you should know what the Animatrix is. But for anybody who doesn't know, anybody who's new here, that is the collection of short animated films that is part of the Matrix trilogy, as far as I'm concerned. But I guess that's what we're really talking about here. So, what are your thoughts, Vesuvius, on the Animatrix being canon? Is it official Matrix Universe canon, yay or nay?
Well, I think we should go episode by episode, because there's 9 different episodes, and some of them are definitely canon, and then some of them are up for debate.
And that's why I invited you, because that is the correct answer. I definitely don't think that you can yes or no overall. I think that there are definite differences with the individual episodes. Now, I'll go ahead and consider the Second Renaissance parts 1 and 2 as, one collective. But outside of that, we got to break it up and go through each one line by line.
Yeah, I think the other 2 that are definitely canon is Final Flight of the Osiris and Kid Story.
Okay, so Final Flight is the very first Animatrix episode, and for anybody who doesn't know, Final Flight of the Osiris actually sets up the events of the Matrix Reloaded. So, I mean, it definitely ties into storyline that we get in the films in the original trilogy. So I think that that's kind of like a no-brainer. Now, not to give too much away because we're going to go back to Enter the Matrix, but Reloaded and Enter the Matrix are tied together with The Last Flight of the Osiris. So it actually connects other pieces of Matrix media together. So I think Last Flight of the Osiris is actually a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got the same characters. The story is basically seamless.
Now, I'm just going to pull up all the Animatrix episodes here so we don't miss any. Now, you mentioned Kid Story, but hold on a second, because I believe it's Final Flight of the Osiris and then Second Renaissance as far as the episode orders.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So what's your take on the Second Renaissance? Because that's before Kid Story, as far as the order of the episodes.
Yeah, Second Renaissance, I think definitely canon. It sets up it does the world building, sets up Morpheus's, I guess, inaccurate information, and kind of fills us in. Now,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
This also ties into a comic, but we'll get into that shortly.
Okay, we can save that, and I totally agree. The creator of the Second Renaissance, the director, Mahiro Maeda. Sorry, it's hard to pronounce his name. Mahiro Maeda. He actually said that he wanted to create a mythos for the Matrix. So I even take it a step further and say that in my opinion, the Second Renaissance is actually like the closest thing we have to a prequel to the Matrix. And these events are definitely Wachowski written, and ultimately I think that's going to be a big crucial point. I want to kind of hammer that in, that if an installment is Wachowski written, then there's a good chance that it should be considered canon. I think that they put in a conscious effort to be consistent and tie things together with all the pieces that they wrote specifically.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. They actually they wrote a very good story, and for all the rumors I hear about plot holes, there's really not very many, if any, that can't be explained.
Yeah, I mean, we can nitpick and find little things here and there, but for the most part, with like literally two exceptions, anything that does come up is going to be in one of these pieces that wasn't written by the Wachowskis.
So how about Kid Story? That's the next episode.
That's the next one. Yeah. So all right, so Kid Story. Okay. So yeah, I think you earlier said that you consider that to be canon, correct?
Yeah, I do, just because there's references to that episode in Reloaded and Revolutions.
Right, and right, the character, the kid, plays a role in both those installments. In the sequels, you see him, you see his backstory. So it's almost like the kid's backstory or the kid's prequel in the Kid Story Animatrix episode. You see Neo, you see Trinity. He wakes up on the Nebuchadnezzar. All this is consistent, and there's no contradictions there. Now in the Holy Trinity video, I didn't really get too into it because I didn't want to like veer off of the point that I was trying to deliver in that video. But I think that we could even argue that the kid's awakening experience or the self-substantiation may have even helped Neo find his way to Mobile Avenue. Just that knowledge of being able to eject yourself from the Matrix without the red pill or without the actual hardware doing it for you. So
yeah, that's really cool. I don't know if I thought about that before, but yeah, the path of the one is made by the many.
Oh yeah, and I think that the kid is a big part of that part of the story. I mean, for those of us who played the Matrix Online and E Pluribus Neo, we know that that's their slogan, but the kid was a leader of that group and a founder of that group. So he really embodies that part, that spirit of, you know, teamwork, and it takes all of us to help Neo for the mission to be accomplished. So yeah, Kid Story, I would definitely count Kid Story as canon. So the next one we have, the next Animatrix episode is Program.
Yeah, so this is the one where they're dueling in like feudal Japan, and Duo wants to go back to the Matrix, and it turns out, well, I won't spoil it, but there's some discussion about, you know, betraying your crew and going back to the Matrix like Cypher wanted.
Okay, so let me just look real quick because I don't remember off the top of my head. Right, so this was written and directed by Yoshiaka Kawajiri, right? So this one is not written by the Wachowskis.
No, and also it doesn't step on the trilogy. It's kind of its own standalone. It's just inspired by the Matrix. There's really no crossover characters or story themes other than going back to the Matrix.
Yeah, no, and he did mention that he was inspired by the moment that you mentioned that you were talking about with Cypher's betrayal. That's what inspired that episode. So he's playing off of that. He's playing off of something that's in the original Matrix, but at the same time, there's no contradictions. There's no reason to think that it doesn't fit. And in the video that I made specifically for Program, in the YouTube Animatrix playlist, I even mentioned that it's possible that one of those crew members was mentioned briefly with the scene in Reloaded when everybody's rushing Neo and asking them to pray for or protect their relatives on the different ships. So, like I said, there's no confirmation that that's the same character, but it's possible that that could be one of those characters. So there could be a Reloaded link to that crew. Now, the thing, though, is with these episodes, like I said, once again, it wasn't written by the Wachowskis, but also we don't know where it falls on the timeline. So this is where I think we get into the realm of debate. Like, if you said that, or let's say for the sake of this conversation, the Wachowskis came out and said, okay, the Program isn't technically canon. Well, that doesn't really hurt anything. You know what I mean? It's not like, okay, that doesn't make sense or it does make sense. Like it like I feel like either way it wouldn't affect the outcome of anything.
Yeah, agreed. Also, I think that it could take place in an earlier version of the Matrix with, you know, just a different resistance. You know, Duo could be their Morpheus.
Yeah, because honestly, now that you mention it, in Program, do they ever mention Neo? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay, so what you go ahead, because I'm gonna look something up. Dialogue.
Well, there's a list of all the hovercrafts and the captains, and, you know, Duo. I can't recall the name of the ship in Program, but Duo is not mentioned as a Zion captain in the trilogy. So it's either non-canon or it's canon, but it's just a different version of the Matrix. You know, that could be version 4, you know, and that's the resistance.
Now, see, that's the thing, though. So Duo is the character inside the Program. Okay. But you would think that the guy she punches when she jacks out is the captain, but they never actually call him captain.
Well, you got the details down.
You see what I mean? So the captain of the ship might not have been on the deck when she's in the training program, and it could still be a captain of one of the ships, you know, one of the 12 ships. We just don't know which one. Now, I'm trying to remember which one. I'm trying to remember. I did say that it could be potentially one captain that was at the crisis meeting, but I'm not going to remember the name of which one I thought it was on the top of my head. But for anybody who's curious about that, I did mention it in the Program video and the Animatrix playlist on the channel here. But I'm looking for a line.
I'm going to respond in the chat here for a moment.
Yeah, I just checked, and they never call him captain. And in fact, the reason why I know the name is because I like looked it up. You know, like the credits. They don't even, you know what I mean? They don't even reference the crew members by name. Sis is the only one who we actually know the crew member's name, because like I said, Duo is only referenced as Duo inside the training construct. So none of the crew members that we see in that episode are actually identified other than the main character. Now, what do you have with this comment here? Let me go ahead and highlight that so everybody can see it. I've got a question I've been dying to ask, but was there an anomaly in the first version of the Matrix? If it collapsed because entire crops died, it wasn't reset by the anomaly returning to the source. Okay, so if by the first version of the Matrix you mean like the Paradise version, or the version that the architect is referring to when he talks about, you know, he made a perfect version, and then the what people call the nightmare version, you know, the two versions that crashed before the systemic anomaly. He doesn't say that there's specifically a systemic anomaly, only that both those beta versions crashed. Like I call it like beta 1, beta 2, and then you get into the Oracle's version that they created together that uses the prophecy as a system of control. So that's when I start counting the Neos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, the architect states that he started counting the versions with the integration of the systemic anomaly. So, you know, to us, you know, that's probably version 3, but who knows? There could have been several beta versions, but he only talked about 2 at the end of Reloaded. But yeah, I say no anomaly in that heaven or hell version that was mentioned that came shortly after.
And again, like when you're talking about the beta versions, I mean, he says it crashed. He does not say that it crashed because of the systemic anomaly. So and I think we answered this second question already, right? That's how does that square with the architect counting from the emergence of one integral anomaly to the next? I believe he counted 6, and he did, but those don't start counting until the Oracle is in the picture, and the Oracle isn't in the picture until after the beta versions crash. And as Vesuvius pointed out, we don't know exactly how many beta versions, but he did only mention 2. So for the most part, most of us count it as heaven version, hell version, and then we start counting Neos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so let's get back into the what is canon discussion here. Where were we? We left off with program, and we both kind of consider that as canon, right? We're both kind of cool with that being canon, even though it wasn't written by the Wachowskis. But there's no major contradictions. There's nothing that flat out says, "Hey, this doesn't work."
Yeah, I think that's viewer's choice, and I don't think it really affects either way right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that, viewer's choice. Okay, so the next episode is episode 6, and that's World Record.
Okay, I think if things apply like World Record and Program, that we could probably move through these a little bit quicker. But I think very similar. Doesn't really matter if it's canon or not. It's a standalone story. Doesn't step on anything that we know prior. And I have a similar idea that it's a different version of the Matrix because the agents were different. Of course, that could just be the artist's rendition, but you know, why not just make it another version of the Matrix?
Yeah, so I in the World Record video in the Animatrix playlist, right? I mentioned that it starts with the same narrator from the Second Renaissance, which you and I both agreed is canon.
Yep.
So I think that that's a clue to chalk on the canon side or pro canon for this. The next thing is, to your point that you just made, I think that also backs up the notion that it was most likely a previous version of the Matrix. I mean, not necessarily a beta version, but definitely before we got to Neo, or version 6 of Neo, however you want to count that, the Keanu Reeves version of Neo. And like I said, I say that because the narrator is the same from the Second Renaissance, which we agreed is like this prequel of the Matrix. So I feel like that consistency and theme, kind of rolls the clock back by default. But yeah, yes. And the other thing I wanted to point out here is, like you said, the style of World Record is very unique, and that's because of the artist that they had doing most of the hand drawings. They wanted to give him an opportunity to show his unique style, and I think that really plays into a lot of these Animatrix episodes that are like kind of questionable, is that the Wachowskis gave these artists creative freedom in their world building, and the visuals may not be consistent with the theme. Like for A Flight of the Osiris, hands down Matrix canon, because they're using the same 3D models. I mean, they've got the Final Fantasy guys. It literally looks like it could have been a part of the actual Matrix movie, right? But the actual anime ones where you have artists drawing it, now you're going to get into different looks. And, in this case, like I said, this artist is bringing his individual style to it. So it looks different than the films, but story wise, there's nothing contradictory. There's nothing to say, okay, this flat out doesn't work. I think that when you look at how the agents look and interact with each other, I definitely could see them being, versions before Smith and the guys we see in the original Matrix film. You know what I mean? I feel like there would be a difference there, but that's it. Like, that's the only thing I can think of really to say, okay, this is not canon. So again, I think this is another one that would count in that viewer's choice. But in my opinion, I would consider that episode canon.
Yeah, I like that phrase, viewer's choice. Yeah, either way, it's a good story. Like it, no hate. And it does have that self-substantiation as well, which, yeah, so we got that twice. We got that twice in the Animatrix.
And this is why I invited you, because you always get me with that. That's a great point that I mean, I've thought about it, but I never really linked it in this way that we're talking about now. To me, if you're going to consider Kid Story canon, because of the self-substantiation link, I would definitely consider World Record canon. Because again, the narrator, who then links that to the Second Renaissance episode, says, some individuals find the way out through wholly other means. So this is an example of that. But it's, again, reinforcing what another episode has shown us is possible in the Matrix. Okay, we've got a question here. It says, I have a question. The architect told Neo if he doesn't return to the source, and Zion will be destroyed by midnight tonight. And also, Neo just made a choice.
Yeah, he was wrong. Architect was wrong because he couldn't predict Neo's behavior, and he couldn't predict his choices. So Zion was not destroyed.
Okay, so in fairness, the architect was wrong with his prediction. I do believe that in that moment, he believed Zion would be destroyed because previously that is how it played out. However, in the moment that he's giving Neo the choice between the left door and the right door, he does not realize or know that the Oracle is going to give Smith the power of her eyes. So he doesn't have all the data to accurately predict. And therefore, that is the dangerous game that the Oracle played. That's why he says you played a very dangerous game. Neo is able to select the other door and still save Zion only because the Oracle gave Smith the leverage for Neo to be able to negotiate in the Machine City later on.
Yeah, that's risky. That's
She's playing with fire, boy.
Yeah. Hey, we should do a what if. What if Neo didn't sacrifice himself?
Okay, so I got another question here, and this one's specific to detective story. So I'm gonna jump into, because we're going in order here. So I'm gonna jump into Beyond first, and then we'll get to that detective story question. But real quick, so let's do episode 7, which is Beyond. So the animatrix story Beyond was written and directed by Koji Morimoto. So again, this is one that wasn't written by the Wachowskis.
Yeah, so this is the one where the kids go to the haunted house and they find the glitches in the Matrix and they
Correct.
start exploiting them.
Now, what I will say is, I believe that Beyond is canon for 2 reasons. One, even though it's in Japan and we don't see other cities in the films, like what we were talking about with World Record, the agents in Beyond actually look like the agents we see in the films. Okay. The second thing is, and I put this screenshot in the Beyond video in the Animatrix playlist on the channel. There's a screenshot of a timestamp when the machines are, saying that they cleaned up the mess, and there's like typed stuff on the screen. It actually has a dated timestamp, like the way you see at the beginning of the original Matrix film and the end of the original Matrix film. So to me, that right there actually does tie it back to the films, even though it's not happening at the same time of the original Matrix film. It tells you what time that happens in the Matrix related to the original Matrix film. So to me, that's like canon proof.
Yeah, to me, it's acceptable that it's canon. If there's the only hitch that I'll have here is that we're told in some spaces that there's only one city, and when we start talking about the Matrix Online and population, there's some world altering information there. So we'll wait on that, but maybe I'll put a bow on this later when we talk about that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, in the films, we only see the one city, and the Matrix Online does reflect that one city. But we do get other cities in other Animatrix episodes. We do get other cities in the comics. So I'm definitely open to the. And here's the thing: I think, while yes, in the Matrix Online, we only see Mega City. That's what we see in the films, but also in the films in Reloaded, when Neo and Trinity and Morpheus get the keymaker from the Marrow Vengeance house, what his link says, he says he's way up in the mountains. So that's not exactly downtown Mega City.
Yeah, there's some conflicting information. I know he's up in the mountains, and I know that Morpheus was in Heathrow Airport in London, I believe.
Right, the newspaper clipping.
Yeah, but there's, we're kind of told that there's only this one city.
So yeah, we'll come back around to that though, because I do want to get to his question here. The next Animatrix episode is Detective Story. And hold on. It says, I wonder if Detective Story is canon because we see how technology is different in that world. There's old-fashioned technology mixed with modern-day technology that was being used by the protagonist. Or Detective Story could be just a previous version of the Matrix. That would explain why the technology is different in that story.
Well, there's a big detail that's left out of that question, and it's a good question. But Trinity is in the story and voiced by Carrie-Anne Moss. So I'm going to give a strong yes that this is canon, and it's probably the same version of the. It's probably version 6.
I too agree that it's version 6, and I think this is where things get a little gray. And again, wait, let me just see real quick just to verify, because I'm pretty sure Shinichiro wrote this. Yes, written and directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, who is the creator of Cowboy Bebop. But the point being, and he also wrote Kid Story. The Wachowskis wrote like they wrote some of it, but he wrote, I think, the beginning part. But this one he wrote all by himself without the Wachowskis writing, right? But again, I feel like in those cases they allowed the artist to do a lot of world building. So yes, the hybrid technology where you see this old school technology mixed with new technology, yeah, you see that in the protagonist, the detective's apartment. But even outside, there's all these old cars, right? So it's not just limited to him. You can't just say, well, maybe he was just stylish and he had his own weird tech. At the same time, you bring up a great point about Trinity, because I personally don't believe that with each version of Neo, you had a Morpheus and a Trinity that looked exactly the same as the one we see. So I think that having Trinity in there confirms that this is that version, that it's before she met Neo. She's looking for Neo, but that this isn't version 5 that we're watching. This has to be Neo version 6 that we're watching. But it does raise a great question. I mean, this is where we get into a potential inconsistency with one that wasn't written by the Wachowskis. When you look at all the old cars, that's not Mega City. We don't see, unless that's like supposed to be a certain slum area of Mega City, perhaps, but that wasn't in the Matrix Online's map.
Yeah, and there's nothing from the Matrix Online, which really had a lot of city detail that would reveal or suggest that that was that part of town. But, with it being Carrie-Anne Moss, then I think that this is definitely canon, and I can chalk that up to just the tone of the film.
So, with your viewer's choice phrase, I'm gonna say that this is canon with an asterisk. I think that the tech, the detective noir vibe, the look of the city, I think that's a legit beef. I mean, does it make it not canon? No, because it doesn't affect the actual story. I think the story can be told with that world building that took place, and it not take it out of the Matrix or take it to a place where the story's starting to contradict itself or anything. And also, it's a simulation, so this could be a change that was changed over by the machines at one point, or changed back, or something they were trying maybe in a specific part of town, and then they just kind of deja vu kittied the thing away. I mean, it's just an out, but the point is that I'm going to go ahead and chalk it up as canon because of your point to the Carrie-Anne Moss storyline. And the second piece of proof that I'll give in the Enter the Matrix strategy guide, I did that Matrix Universe poster video. It references the events of Detective Story in that poster. So I think that's going to go ahead and chalk that up to canon.
Yeah, strong yes. Thank you, Rita Rouse. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, my personal Animatrix favorite, Matriculated.
Yeah, so Matriculated is the one where we have a crew that is trying to persuade machines to join their cause. And they're doing so in a very machine-like way by lying to them and showing them a dream world.
And this one is written and directed by Peter Chung, who I didn't realize until I was researching that video that I grew up a Peter Chung fan. I didn't even know he worked on every cartoon I watched as a kid, right? But yeah, it wasn't written by the Wachowskis, but I think that he did a really good job in terms of researching the Matrix universe to figure out which angle he wanted to take. I felt like he, in his interviews and watching the piece, that he did his due diligence to capture what he wanted to capture without making any waves or without contradicting anything that the Wachowskis had already done in the original film. And I also mentioned that because of the variety of ground machines that we see, we see the runners and the different machines that the scientists have already converted, I feel like that actually suggests that this is taking place in an earlier version of the Matrix. Well, it's in the real world, so I think it takes place before we get to Neo. Now, you can debate how much earlier, but I definitely think that story was supposed to have taken place before Trinity and Morpheus find Neo. But I do think that it can count as canon.
Yeah, I think it can count as canon. again, do we get names of the crew members? Because none of them ring a bell as far as, weren't there like 9 hovercrafts? The Hammer, the Neb, the Icarus, uh, the Logos. There was a couple of the Brahma. So none of those or the captains were mentioned in this particular episode, and it doesn't cross over. But with the tech there, the tech is another clue in this one, because they almost had like snake-like legs and they would slither. So
right, and the only other time we see that kind of variety in ground machines is the Animatrix episode, The Second Renaissance.
Well, maybe that ties in then. Could be in the past.
Yeah, no, I think it falls somewhere between the Second Renaissance and the original Matrix films. And shout out to Gypsy Road. I see him. He says awesome live show there in the chat. I did a couple of live streams on his channel. You guys should definitely go check that out. It's always a good time. But back to this matriculated situation. Yeah, the one crew member name that we get is the protagonist, the main character. Her name is Alexa. But to your point about the crews, we do see that crashed ship. But one thing I noticed about that episode is that no one ever makes any mention of Zion. Like, Zion is not mentioned once. So
yeah,
to me,
almost like a solo crew.
Exactly. I don't necessarily think that we have to link them to one of those 12 ships. I think that this could have happened before Zion was even technically set up. I mean, this could be happening during one of the beta versions of the Matrix, for all we know. This could be happening in the real world while the Nightmare version is getting ready to crash. Oh, I see a question I missed here. I want to see if I get this mouse over here. It says, do you think the Matrix will somehow be more futuristic, being that we are now in 2021? What modern changes do you think there will be? It's funny, we were just having this conversation, Vesuvius.
Discord.
Yeah. So, okay. So to answer that question, Keanu Reeves and David Mitchell, the writer, one of the writers, have both confirmed that this takes place, 20 years after, or about two decades after the trilogy. So they acknowledge that time has passed. How technology will be affected, we don't know, but he did mention in one of those interviews that, they're aware that there are less payphones. So do you work around that? How do you write around that? They're definitely taking into account that the outside world, or in this case, the inside world of the Matrix, is going to look different. If it's going to be saturated with cell phones and social media ads, we don't know. But, they're definitely going to, I don't think it's going to be set in a 1999 setting. That's not the way they're going with this.
So we're gonna wrap up Animatrix.
So yeah, I think so. Right, we just did the last episode. So I mean, really, I think I only put an asterisk on the detective story, and that's because of the design of the cars in the city. But after that, I mean, we pretty much gave it a sweep of the Animatrix counting as canon, as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, no contradictions. Well written. They're canon.
Okay, Ryan said dialing into the Matrix will be too easy with smartphones, and I agree. I don't think they're going to go that route. I think there's still going to be a reference to a hard line, if that's even mentioned. I mean, there's a chance that this movie could take place 90% inside the Matrix. So, or I mean, it could be even 100% inside the Matrix. But because of the shaved head Neo thing, I think that somewhere towards the end of the movie, he's probably going to reawaken, and we might get a glimpse of the real world.
Well, in the Matrix Online, there was a circumstance about hardlines disappearing and some tampering going on. So I'm shoving the Matrix Online into canon, just so you know, just so the audience knows.
Yeah, I'm not going to be mad at you for doing it. So what did you want to cover next? We know that the original Matrix trilogy, the original Matrix Reloaded, Revolutions, obviously canon. We're now chalking the other film, the Animatrix, up as canon. So what do you want to cover next?
I think the comics.
Okay, so let's go to the comics. So we both have a copy of the 20th anniversary edition of the Matrix comics, which is a hardcover. There's a link in the description for anyone who wants to buy it, because I think it is well worth the price of admission. It's a really good buy, and this version has all the different comics that came out on the whatisthematrix.com website, even the ones that didn't go to print prior. So that's why like this is like the go-to when you're talking about Matrix comics, because if you have volume 1 and 2 originally, there's comics that were on the website that aren't in the book. But if you have the hard copy, the 20th anniversary edition, then you have all the different comics. And I think, yeah, you said, so we were saving B166ER. So Bits and Pieces of Information is the first comic. So we might as well start there.
Yeah, and I think this is open and shut case. This is canon.
Yeah, because we already talked about the second Renaissance and we voted that as canon. And the second Renaissance Animatrix episode is actually an expansion of the Bits and Pieces of Information Matrix comic. So they're very well connected. They were written by the Wachowskis. So, and you know how I feel about that. If it's written by the Wachowskis, in my book, it's canon.
Okay, next story, Sweating the Small Stuff.
So what's your take on Sweating the Small Stuff as far as it being canon?
Okay, so I'm looking through it right now, and some of the images look familiar to me. The cat dissolving into code, but just kind of going through, the story's not coming back to me. So I may have to recuse myself from this one.
Give me 1 second here. Okay, so here's the wiki brief summary. It says Sweating the Small Stuff was a webcomic about a blue pill who starts to see through the virtual reality of the Matrix. His girlfriends run with a criminal cartel and their subsequent escape from agents. So it was made by Spencer Lamb and Bill Sienkiewicz. I can't say his last name, but it was not written by the Wachowskis.
So I'll just kind of throw out some thoughts here, since I don't know this through and through. I would say if it steps on the trilogy, which it probably doesn't, then
It does not.
Then it wouldn't be canon. But if the population of the world in the Matrix universe is 7 billion, then there's going to be all sorts of these things, of these happenings that are worth telling. If their population is significantly smaller, then yeah, maybe not. Maybe this is not canon. But now I'm just I'm daisy chaining theories, as I a term that I've coined about a month ago. I'm now daisy chaining theories, but
no,
I know for sure on the next one. I know.
Yeah, no.
Comic.
Yeah, with this one, I personally like. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't. There's references to agents. There's no references to main film characters, but there's nothing contradictory in it or nothing, creatively drawn to stand out and say, oh, that doesn't fit like how we were saying with the detective story. Like I would call this canon without an asterisk. Like to me, there's nothing wrong with it or nothing to make it not canon in my opinion. All right, so the next one is A Life Less Empty.
Yeah, I have feelings on this one.
Okay, so what you got? And this is written by Ted McKeever, not the Wachowskis.
Absolutely canon. It features Morpheus, and it has no effect on the trilogy.
Now, just going off the title, because I'm guessing going off the title, this is the one with the woman who chooses the blue pill, correct?
Yeah, she chose the blue pill. Morpheus was actually the one to make the offer to her. She's a skilled hacker, and she regrets it.
Yeah, it's funny. As you said that, I just turned to page 39, and that's the picture of Morpheus. So yeah, you've got Morpheus in the comic. Like I remembered her referencing him, but I forgot that it actually does show him. So to me, that's kind of like case closed. You know, you got the blue pill reference and Morpheus. It's pretty solid. I'd say canon. Okay, next we've got a personal favorite, but this one might be a little controversial, and that is the Matrix comic Goliath.
Yeah, this one's my favorite.
And this is written by Neil Gaiman and not the Wachowskis. So what's your take, canon or non-canon?
To tell you the truth, I'm undecided. So this conversation might sway me one way or the other. I'll bring up the Matrix Online again. The Matrix Online is just such a vast collection of lore. So, I mean, that's another reason why I hope that remains canon. But in the Matrix Online, there's programs that are modeled after aliens that the machines came in contact with. Well, this story is about an alien invasion. So I feel like if one is canon, then the other really can be canon.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to come back to this for everyone else. But my question to you with the Matrix Online alien story, was that a Chadwick story?
That was something that was kind of built into like the setting. So it was an exile hideout, which in other games would be equivalent to a dungeon. So you would go down and you'd fight your way down, and at the end you fight a boss and get a prize. Well, the alien programs were the gang in that hideout. It was the Ethereals.
Right. So that kind of makes it a rare bit story, right?
No, I no. This was implemented when the game launched, so
Okay.
this would be game design.
So for me, again, this comes back to the whole city thing, like with Beyond taking place in Japan. You know, this story takes place in and around London.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're one of those people who says, okay, well, the Matrix only has Mega City, it only has the one city, well, then you're going to think that this isn't canon. Now, I don't personally subscribe to that. You know, I never found a line or anything in the films, which are hands down canon. I've never seen anything, you know, say there that it is specific to one city. Now the second part of what makes Goliath complicated is the jumping, the fast forwarding of time.
Yeah, the time manipulation. We know that there's some of it. Every time there's a deja vu, there's kind of a lapse in time.
Right. No, that's fair. That's a fair point.
You know, it was so the one that was the clear example was when they were returning to the hotel and Neo sees the black cat. You know, that was what, 2 seconds worth. So, but yeah, time kind of jumped back and continued to go forward.
Now, what I will say is the timetables that are going back and jumping forward in the story take place, you know, between the 70s and the 80s, but it doesn't go as high as 1999, which is where we meet Neo. So for me, this kind of time manipulation could take place inside the Matrix before we are introduced to Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, any of that, and it won't really affect anything. I don't think that those things are enough to say that it's non-canon. I don't think it contradicts anything we see in the films. I get that this is where we start to get into more of that gray area because of the London scene. But for me, and maybe it's a bias because I think it's such a powerful story, but I would go ahead and check this towards the canon side.
Yeah, it fleshes out the Matrix, and even if it's an alternate history, I'm really not. I wouldn't be heartbroken if this was considered to not be canon. I tend to think it is, just because we're kind of seeing a pattern here. These things are written really well. The creative teams really consider the other stories, and I would say yes, this is canon, and I kind of hope it is, because even though aliens might not fit into the Matrix universe like a peg, they are around.
All right, so let's move on to Burning Hope. I mean, we both kind of. I mean, again, I'll go ahead and put the asterisk on Goliath. I'm going to say canon with an asterisk because of the London scene, but I think it's fair to be considered canon. It's not flagrantly not canon. The next Matrix comic here is Burning Hope.
Yeah, so this is another one where I'm not remembering this story. I'm flipping through it right now, so I may need a synopsis.
Okay, so let me just make sure. That's interesting. There's not even a synapse on the Matrix wiki for this one.
Synopsis? What am I saying?
Yeah, it's the one I thought it was. So, short version is this is the one where they find out that the large pyromaniac inside the Matrix is actually a little girl in the real world. So, this actually hints to the whole trans allegory thing. The whole switch thing where you could be one gender in the real world and one gender with, or the opposite gender with the RSI in the Matrix.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's more than that. In this case, it's not just being the opposite sex. In this case, like I said, you've got a grown adult setting fires in the Matrix who turned out to be a little girl in the real world. So, story wise, there's no contradictions in terms of what was said, and that's pretty much the premise of the story. We don't have aliens, we don't have time manipulation, we don't have new cities. There's nothing world building wise technology to make you think anything is out of place. You've got a crew and references to the crew and seeing them on the ship, but their ship looks like any other ship that we would see in the Matrix. So I have no problems with Burning Hope being canon.
I will defer to your opinion.
All right, so let's move on to the next one, Butterfly.
Yeah, so Butterfly is, I think there's no dialogue in this, and I'm going to flip through real quick. No dialogue, but just action. So a red pill is being pursued by agents, and there's 3 of them, and they all look alike. And he kind of crashes through the window of someone who looks like they're a monk-like character.
Mm-hmm. This is the Butterfly comic. Yes, you're correct.
Yes.
And it was written by Dave Gibbons, not the Wachowskis.
Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but let me see. So I think that with the tone of this, it's right in there with the 6th version of the Matrix, and this could absolutely be canon.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, I don't see anything flagrant to tell me it's not canon. All right, so the next Matrix comic here is A Sword of a Different Color, and that's written by Troy Nixie.
Yeah, so this is a good one. This will answer the question, are there people outside of Zion? And the answer is yes. There's an old hermit. He kind of discovers and cares for, I guess, a Zion crew member that found his way into the real world, onto the surface. and he kind of nurses them back to health.
He nurses him back to health, and I believe, doesn't he make it back to Zion? He's telling the story about this old man, correct?
Yeah, I'm just flipping through. It doesn't end with our character returning to Zion. So this story seems kind of like it's like another standalone.
No, it starts with him laying down back in Zion, and then he tells the story about where he was.
Okay.
But the reason why I brought that up is because, again, he's referencing, being part of Zion. So.
Yep, you're right. Yeah, so he does end up back in Zion. The Sentinels are a very similar design.
Yeah, so for me, I it was, to me, it was like a cute little story, but nothing flagrant, nothing standing out saying this is not canon. Like I said, the Sentinels look on par. Doesn't appear to be happening at the same time of the films, but it's definitely happening post Zion.
Yeah, so I think that, again, this one could be canon. I won't give it a strong yes because there's nothing that I recall or that I can find skimming through that's directly related to the trilogy. But there's enough clues here that it's canon.
Okay, so the next Matrix comic is titled "Get It" by Peter Bage.
Yeah, so this is the one with the very different artwork.
And I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be my first one, but I'm going to go ahead and say that this is not canon.
I was hoping we were going to have a disagreement here, but I'm going to say that this is not canon as well.
It based on the different theories I've seen on the Matrix 4, they could go a route in the Matrix 4 to make this canon. But where things stand right now, where Revolutions left off, where the Matrix Online went, I don't see this as canon. In fact, there's another Peter Bage comic here, and I think by default his are not canon, but we'll get to that when we get to his. But for anybody who doesn't know, in this Matrix comic, basically the characters are having a discussion after leaving the theater after having just watched the Matrix film. So that's why we're saying that it's not canon, because they're basically saying that, or this comic is about the audience discussion after watching the movie.
Yeah, it's a story about the Matrix. It's not a story within the Matrix. And if this story is responsible for the Matrix within a Matrix theories, then I'm ready to throw it out.
So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and say that's our first agreed non-canon, and that is the Matrix comic Get It. So the next one is There Are No Flowers in the Real World by David LaFamme, and this one is not written by the Wachowskis.
I'm skimming this one because I don't recall reading this one. And I have read most of the comics, but I haven't read them all. This one, well, no, this image looks familiar. The Sentinels look the same, similar cell phones. He morphs into an agent. And he shoots an agent. Well, that's unusual.
Okay. So I had this conversation with someone online. So what happens here is the injuries that the operative sustained on his hovercraft affect him inside the Matrix. Okay, like his legs are all jammed up in the real world, so they're like all linguini like inside the Matrix. Now he powers.
Chappelle Show reference.
Yeah, linguini. So he powers through it. But it's interesting because I was having this conversation with someone asked me online, just talking about how, they said, well, the mind makes it real, talking about getting injured inside the Matrix. But in this case, it's the opposite. He got injured outside of the Matrix, and that affected him inside. So I think there's an argument there.
Well, that's a cool concept. Now we have we have something to reference. Did you reference this in that in that discussion?
Oh yeah, no, that I did. But at the time, I was just, I guess, in that conversation, I considered it canon by default. But for the sake of this conversation, where we're like just going through them and analyzing, I kind of feel like this might be another asterisk. I mean, that it wasn't explained that way in the film, so I can understand the argument of that being contradictory. I don't want to go as far as saying that it's flagrantly non-canon like the Get It comic, but I can put an asterisk. And also, this is another one that says Arizona, somewhere near Phoenix. So this is another one that takes place outside of Mega City. So yeah, so for there are no flowers in the real world, I'm gonna give it canon with an asterisk.
Yeah, I can accept that.
Okay, so the next one is The Miller's Tale, and this is a Paul Chadwick comic.
Well, right there we know it's canon.
Right. And for anybody who doesn't know, Paul Chadwick is who the Wachowskis picked to write the story for The Matrix Online. And he has 3 Matrix comics, which is more than any other writer for the Matrix comics. So for me personally, anything Chadwick is as good as Wachowski as default canon. But specifically to The Miller's Tale, spoiler alert, anybody in Matrix University should know that you're going to get spoilers here. So read the comics, watch the Animatrix, so I don't ruin anything for you. But meantime, The Miller's Tale has a young Morpheus reference. So for me, I mean, that just locks it up.
Yeah, so this one is about an individual in Zion who finds a way to grow wheat and make bread. And in pursuing that endeavor, they have an annual bread festival. And that is where Morpheus is shown in this comic.
Okay, I missed this comment before. It says, I'm a little late on responding to this, but I don't believe the Goliath story is canon due to the fact that in this story, the androids use humans as CPUs instead of batteries.
That's a contradiction.
Well, hold on.
Or is it?
Because, yeah, there's 2 things here. One, the rumor, which in fairness, I was never able to confirm the genesis of this rumor, but there is a rumor that is widely known and for the most part accepted that the original plan for the Matrix explanation of why people were plugged in by the Wachowskis in the original script was that humans were being used for their processing power. So they were being used by as CPUs in the original designed for the films, but the studio pushed back and said that's too complicated. You guys got to change this up. Let's just use them as batteries. So that's the first thing. Like I said, I will accept that that's a rumor, and it is not confirmed how that rumor was leaked. Now, the flip side, though, is specific to the comic Goliath. When you say androids use the humans as CPUs, I mean, he was using him. They were using him as a pilot. They were using him as almost what's the word I'm looking for, or phrase I'm looking for? He was trained for this mission, but that doesn't make everyone else who's plugged into the Matrix not batteries. This specific battery had a specific purpose.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, so what comic are we on? I want to get back to the...
I think we're wrapping up Miller's Tale, and we're going into Artistic Freedom.
Okay, so Artistic Freedom is the one... Hold on. It was written by Ryder Windham, so not Wachowski written, and this is the one with the Spoon Boy, correct?
Yeah, the Spoon Boy. He does. I don't think he talks in this one. But there is some world blurring content in this particular episode.
So where do you see the lines get blurred?
There's an artist in this story, and I believe it's a she.
Yes, it's it's a female artist. Yes.
So she makes these sculptures, and they're sentinels, and they're machines. So she's basically waking up and remembering.
And the ticket to the show is like a Matrix code ticket. It's like, it looks like the green code, the sushi recipes.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's what it is. And there's a couple of machines in here that look like the other machines. That the one that unplugged Neo looks like that's in there. Is the Spoon Boy plugged in?
Yes, Spoon Boy should be plugged in. Okay. So I'm glad you said that, because this tells me that this would have had to have occurred before he returned to Zion, or before he was taken to Zion, because he's still plugged in. He's inside the Matrix when he gives, or rather when he sends the kid to give Neo the spoon. It's a Zion made spoon. So, he's also a child. He's not just riding around on the Neb, whenever he wants. So, once he left the Oracle's care, he went back to Zion. We know that from the Matrix Reloaded. So that means this story has to have taken place before the Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah, it does look like there are some red pills in this. So I can accept this as canon. I see some sentinels kind of flying around inside the Matrix here. So, I would put an asterisk next to this one. They could do the Men in Black and erase everybody's mind as well.
Well, no, I believe that the sentinels you see flying around is a hallucination of the artist induced by the Spoon Boy. That was my interpretation of what was going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see this being canon.
But yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, the artist basically, sees the real world and the pods and the battery towers, the power towers. She sees the Machine City and the Sentinels in her dreams, and makes art inspired by that. So, it's not as hardcore of an awakening as self-substantiation. She's not like the kid or the athlete of world record. She didn't completely jack out, but she has seen images of the real world while being jacked into the Matrix. And having the Spoon Boy there, I think, kind of makes it consistent, and I would consider it canon based on that, and based on the lack of contradictions. There's nothing there to like I said, at least my interpretation of the machines being inside the Matrix is a vision and not something that like was supposed to have happened inside the Matrix. I don't think it had to get deja vu kiddied away.
Okay, so this next one, Hunters and Collectors, I'm not very familiar with this. I'm browsing through it, and this one doesn't really ring a bell to me.
And that's written by Greg Ruth. Again, not written by the Wachowskis. This one is actually kind of cool. This one is like this guy like fights Sentinels in the real world. Yeah, he's hardcore.
I see a what is it, like a license plate for the hovercrafts? You know what I mean, right?
Okay. The plaques, like the Nebuchadnezzar plaque or the Logos plaque. And I believe the crash ship in this case is the Pequod.
What's that mean?
I'll tell you in a second.
Not a ship that we're familiar with in the trilogy.
It's a Moby Dick reference. Pequod is a fictional 19th century Nantucket whaling ship that appears in the 1851 novel Moby Dick.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, very cool. So again, it's not part of the fleet. It's not the 12 ships in the Zion fleet that we see in Reload.
And there's nothing saying that every hovercraft has to be inside the Zion fleet.
Especially with the Matrix 4, and we've got that new plaque that was leaked. There's a video about that for anybody who missed it. But this plaque does say made in the USA on the Pequod. So there's some consistency there. I don't think there's anything in the story to suggest that it is not canon, though. So I would consider this canon personally, especially with that little nugget that you found with the ship plaque.
I will accept that.
Okay, so the next story is An Easy One by Tommy Lee Edwards.
I'm browsing through this one. I may have to sit this one out as well. I don't know that I've even read this one. We have some agents that look like the version 6 agents. And I do reference that because other agents in other versions have looked very different. We've had all sorts of agents from angels to commandos. And if the Matrix Online is canon, then that stuff will hold water.
Yeah, so okay, just looking at it, because this isn't one that stood out to me. I have read it, but it wasn't like super memorable or anything. Let's see what we got here. Right, and this was one that was not included in the original printed version. This was one that was online that made it to the 20th anniversary edition. And it says the story begins with Avalon and her crew preparing to embark on a mission in the Matrix to destroy a virus using a load of cash as its carrier, an AI which was known to instill confusion and schizophrenia in those who touched it. So, in the sense that, we don't know this crew from the films, again, this could be a previous version of the Matrix crew. I don't see any outstanding contradictions. At the same time, like I said, this is something that we don't have any. There's no main characters. There's nothing to really, tie it to anything else. There are agents, though. And these agents, they look like, more modern agents. It's not like World Record where they look like different agents. They look like agents that would fit the systemic anomaly versions of the Matrix. Mm-hmm. So, if our default is canon, this would be considered canon, I think. It could be asterisk canon for the lack of evidence, but again, I wouldn't say it's non-canon in the sense that there's contradictory stuff going on here jumping out at me. All right, so the next one is Farewell Performance, and I think this is probably the first one I read in print. I mean, I read most of them online when they were on the website, but when I got the original printed version and not the 20th anniversary version, I believe it was the first one I read. So this one's about an illusionist, like a David Copperfield or Chris Angel kind of guy.
Bixby, the incredible liberationist for hire.
And it's written by Jim Kruger and not the Wachowskis. It also features agents that look like, you know, modern agents, Smith looking agents. So yeah, I'm gonna vote Canon for this one, just again on the same kind of tip that there's nothing in it to suggest it's not, or that it's contradictory, or any animation that makes it outside of Mega City. I mean, this could have taken place in Mega City just fine.
Yeah, I gotta reread these because this one I do remember. It's a small story. It's a short story. There's no reason why this can't be canon. It's got some of the phrases "The Matrix has you."
All right, so the next one is Deja Vu, which is another Paul Chadwick comic. It's 2 of 3. And as we said before, if you're asking me, Chadwick is canon. So
Yeah, agreed. It's written by Paul Chadwick. I mean, look at the power plant. You know, on page 196. It's right out of the movies.
okay, so the next one is System Freeze, and that's written by Poppy Z. Bright.
Oh, you see the agent in this one? He looks just like Johnson.
Right. So you've got an agent, looks like a modern agent, and what's funny is we've talked about this before in the in your podcast, talking about the Matrix Online, because I compare this story to Danielle Wright. You know, when I read this story, or rather when we were talking about Danielle Wright in your podcast, I thought of this story because the Danielle Wright character, I feel like, could have been inspired by this. I mean, this is just my speculation. You know, there's no confirmation of this, but you know, I always imagined if the main character in the System Freeze story had honored her end of the deal, she could have turned into the Danielle Wright character in the Matrix Online.
Oh. Yeah, recall that.
So with that, go ahead.
So this revolves around somebody making a deal with an agent and the agent upholding their end of the deal.
So in this story, yeah, she makes a deal with the agent. You know, the agent, she's a computer programmer. They want her to work on a specific AI kind of thing inside the Matrix, and she's hiking and, you know, falls into like an ice cave, and she thinks she's going to die, and then the agent appears and says, no, we need you to finish your project, we need you to finish the work, so I'm going to save you. And once she gets back to, you know, when they deja vu kitty the thing away, you know, she's fine, you know, she goes back to work, but then she doesn't finish the project. You know, she doesn't believe that that really happened. So, you know, the agent basically tells her that she has to honor the deal, or, you know, I'm going to put you back where you were. And she, you know, she doesn't honor the deal. She didn't finish the project. So, you know, I don't see anything in that story that says it couldn't be canon. I would check canon. Or in this case, like I said, with the Matrix comics, it's more of a default canon.
Yeah, I do feel like we're defaulting to canon. Hopefully, we can argue a little bit in the future here about what's canon and what's not.
Yeah, no, but again, with Matrix University, my goal is kind of to set the record straight. So I don't think it's a bad thing that most of this stuff could be considered canon. I think it speaks to the uh, attention to detail that the Wachowskis played into this thing, but also the creative freedom that they gave these artists in world building. That's one thing I forgot to say before we got into the Matrix comics. What a lot of people don't know is they started the Matrix comics before the original Matrix film even came out. Like they knew they were going to do this. Okay, so the next one is The King of Never Return. And that's written by Ted McKeever.
I don't recall reading this one either, but the imagery does look familiar.
Okay, I actually thought this one was really cool. This is basically a crew goes rogue. They decided that they don't want to, fight the good fight. They don't want to fight for the resistance anymore. Now they're not necessarily turning, they're not going cipher. They're not selling out to the point where they're killing their own, but they don't want to return to Zion. They just want to kind of freelance. But they are violating orders. And to that point, they don't mention Locke specifically, but because of the whole dynamic between Morpheus, Locke, Roy Jones Jr., that whole thing, that dynamic of, oh, I'll stay just to see what Deadbolt does to you, it's got that vibe to it where, like I said, it's not confirmed that this is a crew that is happening in the Neo or the Keanu Reeves version that we see in the film. But, I could see this being like version 5. So did you have thoughts on that one?
I really can't weigh in on this one. I'm not up on it, and I'm not very familiar with it.
Yeah, no, I'm cool with defaulting that one to canon. The next one is An Asset to the System, which was written again by Troy Nixey. So, we got repeat offenders here. But not written by the Wachowskis.
Police Academy training.
Yes, this is that episode. So again, you have agents. You have the main character as a security guard, which kind of comes up again in the Path of Neo, but plays out a lot differently there. In the end, you see the pods, the battery towers, the dock bot. I would definitely default this to canon. There was nothing in the story that stood out as contradictory to me.
I can accept that.
The next story is A Path Among Stones, which was by Greg Ruth. And this is the little girl who's getting, I guess, questioned by the psychoanalyst. And this is a pretty straightforward episode. Like, there's not a lot of crazy things going on here. You don't see the real world at all. There is an agent towards the end. In fact, it's so, like, the setting is so basic. It'd probably make like a really good play, like a stage play.
Yeah,
But
it's just an isolated story.
Yeah, it's definitely a one-off. It could have taken place anywhere within the systemic anomaly versions of the Matrix, inside the Matrix. Again, you got an agent reference, but nothing outstanding or flagrant. I would say default canon. Okay, so the next story is Run Saga Run, and that was written by Spencer Lamb.
And right away we have familiar At least one familiar face, but a very familiar setting and action, and a mention of the Oracle.
Right. She was one of the Oracle's kids that ran away, but by them referencing, like you said, the Oracle and that she's running from agents, I would say that this is definitely canon. In fact, I would love to see her character come up in future, Matrix Expanded Universe or referenced in the Matrix 4. That would be really great.
Do we have any blonde actresses in Matrix 4?
I'd say Ellen Holman, but she dyed her hair black. She got the Trinity cut, man. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so. The next one is Wrong Number by Vince Evans.
Yeah, this is a good one.
All right, so what you got?
So we have some red pills that are running from agents, and we encounter a municipal worker working on the phones, and she makes them repair it, and
right,
Matrix stuff happens at the end.
Right, but we got an agent reference, so, and again, it's more of a one-off story, but no real world, very, very inside the Matrix story, so this could definitely be canon or default to canon.
Yeah, I agreed. Defaulting to canon, the pattern continues.
So broadcast depth.
Not too familiar with this one, but some of the images are ringing bells.
Okay, so this one is, there's a crew on a ship, and one of the crew members has little girls, and they're not on the same ship. But the little girls want to contact their mother inside the Matrix. Unfortunately, by doing so, they alert the system of their mother's location. And, you get to see some Sentinels in the real world. There's no reference to this crew being one of the 12 ships from Reloaded or Revolutions, so that would suggest that it's, an earlier version of the Matrix, but nothing outstanding.
Yeah, it fits in the universe.
Okay, so now we're back to Peter Bage. And Who Says You Can't Get Good Help These Days is the title of this Matrix comic. What are your thoughts on this one?
So I'm just skimming in here, and I do recall reading this in the past. And we do have Morpheus. Is it really
we have Morpheus and the Architect in this one?
Yes, we do. This is a short one.
It's a short one, but it's really weird. I mean, I think like the Get It one, like I said, I think the Peter Bage ones should be chalked up as non-canon. I think they're just comic relief. In this case, someone's trying to get someone to like install like a flat screen TV.
Yeah, we get the Keymaker as well.
But basically, the main character is harassing the Keymaker and Morpheus and the Architect for help. I don't think that the Architect makes house calls, so I'm going to go ahead and say non-canon.
Yeah, I'll say non-canon. You can't just stroll into the Architect's office like this.
Oh, it gets better. I mean, he's full on painting at the end of this thing.
The Architect is painting. He's painting his house.
Yeah, he can come paint my house.
Be perfect.
All right, so we're gonna chalk that up as non-canon for for both Peter Page Matrix comics. I'm gonna say is non-canon. The next one is Saviors, written by Spencer Lamb.
I don't know that I've read this one.
Yeah, this one is like, it wasn't my favorite. It's not that I disliked it. I thought it was actually good as far as like Matrix theme. It's got a little kind of cypher vibe to it, but different flavor. It's not the same. Like, it's not a rewrite of that. It's
We have a robot here with 6 legs. Looks like an insect. Very much looks like something out of the Matrix Online cinematics.
Well, okay. So if you are someone who subscribes to the Matrix Online, there is no such process with Agent Gray with Agent Gray telling Kryptos that he cannot be reinserted into the Matrix, which would also mean that Agent Smith was lying to Cypher about being able to be an actor and reinserted into the Matrix. Then this would be contradictory, because in this case, he is reinserted into the Matrix. Now, I personally don't subscribe to the idea that it's impossible.
Well, I'll say 2 things on this. I think when Agent Gray told Kryptos there was no such process, that there was no such process yet. And it was because Cypher didn't survive. He held up his end of the bargain, but he didn't survive long enough to be reinserted. The other thing is, it did seem like when Agent Smith was talking with Cypher, that he was just placating him. He's like, "Oh, I want to be an actor. I want this." He's like, "Yeah, whatever you want." So he could be lying. I could accept either way on that, but I think that it's pretty easy. Weren't we talking about that on Discord earlier today too?
And the thing is with Kryptos, I referenced the line real quick. The joke kind of went over everybody's head except for yours. So shout out to you for that. But no, with Kryptos, he also had other stuff going on. Kryptos by that point had already been corrupted. You know what I'm saying? So there might not have been a process for Kryptos. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
That said, I will say canon with an asterisk, not default canon. This is asterisk canon because I am willing to accept that debate. I think the jury is still out on that specifically. And this would be a contradiction to that if that is the case. I do not agree that is the case, but I do accept that there is room for that to be the case. So with that said, I'll say asterisk canon. This is, Barry Bonds canon. Okay, I missed the question here. I did bring it up on the screen though. Ryan asked, how pivotal was Spoon Boy for Neo discovering his abilities?
My thoughts?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Very pivotal. Neo had an aha moment when he spoke to that kid.
Well, you were breaking up on my end. Can you say that again?
Neo had an aha moment when he was speaking to that kid. And, as you grow up, you kind of long for those aha moments, So, very pivotal.
Yeah, very pivotal. And, he reminds him with the real world spoon, in the first Matrix, he shows him the hack or the trick of bending the spoon. Everybody played their part. I mean, I think a lot of the Matrix is, teamwork. And I won't say that his role was as important as, let's say, a Trinity who sacrificed herself, right? So maybe he can still make it to the end without meeting the Spoon Boy. But at the same time, as the Oracle would say, we are all here to do what we are all here to do. And the Spoon Boy definitely played his role. I would definitely say that there were other teammates that had more important roles. But if you subscribe to the everything happens for a reason, or Back to the Future logic, if you remove the Spoon Boy, yes, it's possible that Neo would not have made it to the finish line. So I personally would say that he was important, but not the most important.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Oh, great point. And I did mention this in the Holy Trinity video. He says, or else Neo would have been stabbed by Mr. Smith in a human's body. That is actually dead on, because I mentioned that real world spoon. The kid delivering the real world spoon, he promised the Spoon Boy that he would deliver it to Neo before he left. If the kid doesn't run down the hallway saying Neo, so that Neo turns around, the comment here in the chat is dead on. Then Bane, Agent Smith as Bane in the real world, would have stabbed Neo, and Neo wouldn't have made it. So that's actually a great point. Right, and I missed his earlier question, which is the Matrix and the Terminator series you think will be connected like in the Matrix Online?
You have come to the right place, sir.
Right. Well, I connected them. I want to be clear about this. I connected them in our faction, the Liquid Huzu, on the Matrix Online. Now, this is not canon. That was not canon. That was fan art. That was, our faction's backstory. So I just want to clear that up, because I do have that video explaining how we tied those stories together, but that was just fan fiction. That was our own group's canon. And, yes, there are people in the world who claim that they wrote both, but as far as the Matrix universe canon, there is no real Terminator connection.
And they're different studios, correct?
Correct. Now so many different studios have owned Terminator since the first one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they kept selling it. That's why they're all so different. And I'm trying to remember who put out the first one now. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on that.
Does Miramax sound familiar?
Maybe. Either way, we know it's not Warner. I can tell you that. It is not Village Roadshow Warner.
Okay, so comic?
Right. The next comic is I Can't, and we kind of covered this with the kid story and the Animatrix. I Can't is, or I Can't, however you want to, it's a little double entendre there. This is the Matrix comic with the kid story, or with the kid in it, excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's canon. It picks up with the Matrix Online, and this is like his push. Like, this is one of those growth moments for the kid, and he does go on to kind of grow in the Matrix Online, and he started off pretty annoying there, but he came to be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, I agree. This is hands down canon. I talked about this in the kid story, or rather the kid explained video. This further talks about his development, and we, see where he ends up in the Matrix Online. But I think that this comic actually really sets up his character for the Matrix Online, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so the next one is Day In, Day Out, and that's another Ted McKeever. So I stand corrected. Ted McKeever, it looks like he's tied with Paul Chadwick as far as Matrix comics. Yeah, they both have 3. But Day In, Day Out. So would you say canon or non-canon?
Oh, this is another one. I don't know if I've read this.
Okay, this is the one that has Agent White. I actually made a video that references this.
Yeah, I recall.
Yeah, Agent White is pretty crazy. And we see that again in The Path of Neo. So based on that, I'm going to go ahead and say canon.
Oh, we have to get the Path of Neo. Let me put an asterisk on my vote, and I'm only basing this on your Agent White reference, because I would have to take a look and really read through to have a stronger opinion.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's a yeah, I don't see a contradiction there. Like I said, I think Agent White is seriously messed up. So all right, so the next one, so you're gonna say non-canon for that?
I'll stay asterisks.
Asterisk canon? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is the return of the project. Oh, I hate that word. Return of the project. Return of the prodigal son. There you go. Return of the prodigal son is the next one. Written by Greg Ruth.
Okay, I'm flipping through this one. This one does not ring a bell at all. It looks really good.
Oh wow, I forgot. I mean, not forgot, but I just now realized that okay. I'm sorry. Continue. No, Greg Ruth wrote 2, but did art on another one, but only wrote 2. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, he did write 3. I'm sorry. Yeah, Greg Ruth did write 3. So you got Ted McKeever, Greg Ruth, and Paul Chadwick all wrote 3 Matrix comics.
This one looks really good.
It's kind of intense. I didn't catch anything that's like super contradictory in it. You know, it's doesn't make any reference to any existing characters. You know, it's all inside the Matrix. There's no real world references. There's no city references.
Well, I will have to default to your opinion.
Yeah, this is a default canon. I mean, I don't see an argument to why it wouldn't be. And that would bring us to our last and final Matrix comic, which is Let It All Fall Down, which is Paul Chadwick again. And this is another one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, so this one, you know, expanding on my opinion of Paul Chadwick and his writing being canon, the story fits. The story fits in the Matrix universe.
Yeah, it really fits in the Matrix universe. And like you said, you know, I default to Chadwick as canon. But what I really liked about this one is just for me, you know, at the time when I first read this on the website, in fact, I think I didn't find it on the website until we were playing Matrix Online, until Matrix Online was live. But like, it just really reinforced to me like the idea that Neo is more than, you know, that he was hybrid, and that there's like this AI in the system dynamic going on, you know, like AI almost, I mean, in this case, you know, you have a computer programmer writing it, but it, you know, it in a way had that, you know, ISO Tron Legacy flavor where, you know, the AI in that case manifested. In this case, it was written, but it's AI written in the world of the Matrix. You know, it's not AI written in the real world. So it just opens up all these possibilities as far as the story. I just really liked it, but I would consider it to be canon.
Yeah, agreed. Very good story. Mr. Chadwick does it again.
A true professional and gentleman. But yeah, so that wraps up the Matrix comic, the 20th anniversary edition. Right, we had 2 clear non-canon stories, but for the most part, we would consider most of those stories to be canon. I mean, there was a couple debatable ones, but overall, I would say majority of the Matrix comics are canon. But if you're looking to avoid the non-canon, then just skip over the Peter Page comics. Like I said, they're great for comic relief, but I just don't think they hold up to the storyline.
Yeah, they're different in tone. They're not bad stories. They're more like, you know, they relate to us more than they relate to the characters in the Matrix.
Okay, real quick, I got a question here. What about aliens in the Matrix? We already talked about the Goliath episode in this episode earlier, so you might catch that on the playback. I did not make a specific video talking about that episode yet, but you know, that is the official reference. And then there Vesuvius also mentioned the reference to aliens in the Matrix Online. So aliens have been mentioned in the Matrix universe, but I have not made a video about that specifically on my channel yet. All right, so what do you want to cover next? We covered, so let's just recap because we've been talking for a while here. So let's just go over everything. Obviously, the original Matrix trilogy, 1, 2, and 3, canon. We pretty much agreed that the entire Animatrix canon. We just went through the Matrix comics, majority canon with 2 exceptions. So what do you want to go to next?
Well, I think we got to go to the video games, and we got to start with Enter the Matrix.
All right, so ETM, Enter the Matrix. I'm going to definitely go canon. It sets up a lot of different scenes that we see in the Matrix Reloaded. They were designed to tie in together, which was awesome. It was an awesome experience to play the game and watch the movie together. I do think that there's room for debate in the sense that, if you play as Ghost or if you play as Niobe, the scenes are the same but not. But it's also the Matrix, so that doesn't mean that both couldn't have happened.
I kind of give the games some slack. It's canon if you play as Niobe, and it's still canon if you play as Ghost. Sometimes Ghost is like, if you're playing as Niobe, you're driving the car, and if you're playing as Ghost, you're shooting out the window. So it's
but like with the Keymaker, like they both make out with Monica Bellucci, like Persephone, the Mayor of Vengeance wife. They both have to pay the toll price of a kiss. So like I said, it's the Matrix, so both could have happened.
And it's a game. You have to be able to move the story, and they gave you the option to play as both characters. If they assigned you a character per level to keep it canon, it would lose a little something. We got a little bit more story with Ghost.
And for me, even though, like you said, you could play as Ghost, you could play as Niobe, but because of the cutscenes, because they shot the cutscenes with the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions down in Sydney, to me, that makes it canon, because if we already assume that the films are canon and they shot it at the same time, like, it's obviously Wachowski written, I think me personally, I sign Enter the Matrix hard canon.
Absolutely.
Now, in order of video game operation, which comes next, Matrix Online or Path of Neo? I think Matrix Online, right?
Yeah, Matrix Online. I think if you wouldn't mind going out of order, we could address Path of Neo. And Matrix Online is, very
that's a bigger conversation. Yeah. So that's fine. We'll jump ahead to Path of Neo and circle back to Matrix Online. So, what are your thoughts on the Path of Neo being canon or non-canon?
I think non-canon.
Yeah, we're in agreement. In fact, I'll even go hard non-canon.
Yeah, there was a lot that happened. Like, when you start off, it's like, you're following Thomas Anderson, and then you're in doing training with Link, and it's like, oh, this fits, and then it goes in its own direction. I won't say it goes off the rails. It's a video game. It's based on the Path of Neo. It goes its own direction. They're giving you if it just followed the story of the Matrix, you'd be like, oh, well, nothing new. Then they give you something new, and you say, oh, well, this isn't canon. Well, it's not canon. They even said it was supposed to be just a fun thing.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll come back to the Wachowskis in a minute, but I totally think it went off the rails when you're fighting giant ants, like man-sized ants. That was just a little bit too much for me.
It went its own way, and
yeah,
they experimented and they had some fun with it, and it's fine.
Yeah. So for anybody who didn't play it, or for anybody who played it but didn't beat it or didn't finish it, before the final boss, the Wachowskis, have a little moment where they like talk to you as the player, right? And I've put this clip is on my channel. You can watch it in the Wachowski interview compilation video. I believe it's also in the Holy Trinity video. So, it's up here if you haven't seen it. But they basically say, like, okay, you know, we just wanted to make some button smashing merch and have fun with it. And, like what we did in the movies was great, but not everything that we did in the movie for that story is a great story for a video game. So now fight the Megasmith. So as we know, in the end of Revolutions, Neo does not fight a mega-sized Smith. He fights the one Smith. So, right there's a contradiction, but as Vesuvius mentioned, the Wachowskis explained it. Now, some people say that, right, they're explaining it specific to Megasmith, but that's where I disagree. I believe that explanation goes for the entire game. That's just my personal interpretation of what they were saying.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. It was based on the path of Neo and playing as Neo, and it was a fun video game.
All right, so now let's move on to the big one. Let's move on to the Matrix Online. Is the Matrix, and this is really like the big question. Save the best for last. This is the ultimate debate. This is what kind of moved this live stream forward into reality, because we just had this conversation recently, and that is the Matrix Online official Matrix Universe canon or no?
Well, I think it is. So let me give a little backstory on the storyline of the Matrix Online. It came when you jacked in and played, you could choose an organization. So you could be Zion, Machine, or Merovingian. And they would have live events which would push the story forward, and you could participate, and there was like contests you could win. So you could kind of star in the story if you won that particular event. The story was also pushed forward through through missions. So you could pull up your inventory or your mission panel and start a mission, and it would give you the storyline. And then we got some things happened with the game where the team that would actually play the main characters were cut, and they brought in other players to as a special group to help the remaining developers push the story forward. It was easier than programming NPCs. They could just tell them, okay, just meet me at such and such a place the next day, and they would do a story event. So the further you go, you have more organizations that you could join. So you went from 3 to 5. You could be a radical Zion and a radical machinist, okay, a Cypherite. So between the cinematics, which would give you some story, the missions, which would give you some story, and the events, you're getting plus all 5 organizations. So you're getting pieces of the story as you play. And that was really, I think, the biggest barrier for this story being A, understood, and B, endeared.
I think that's a fair assessment.
So over the past year, we you and I and Star Schward did that podcast series, kind of talking about the Matrix Online and speculating as to what could be in the Matrix 4. So we were able to get our hands on an archive, and it had the whole storyline, and so it's streamlined. It's much easier to go through that archive or the podcast and get the story than it is to search it all out on the internet, because it's really not out there very much. So I think some things are canon and some things are not.
Yeah, and real quick, I'll try to remember to link that podcast that you're mentioning in the description, so anybody who missed it can check it out, because we really covered like every storyline in the Matrix Online in your podcast. I think it was I'm really glad we took the time to do that. But yeah, and like the stream, people, anybody who's in the room, please like the stream. I think that I have to agree with you in terms of yes and no. I like the way that I worded it before with, talking about how Rarebit described it. I mean, he basically said there's levels to it. There's no hard yes or hard no, but you know, as I mentioned earlier, the Matrix comic writer Paul Chadwick was picked by the Wachowskis to write the story. As things changed over time in the game, politics, ownership, there was a turning of the tides, and Chadwick stepped away, and Rarebit took over the storyline. And shout out to Rarebit for giving us that extra time with the game and putting in all the work. It became skeleton crew and then just a one-man show. But with that said, anything that Paul Chadwick wrote, I consider canon or Chadwick canon. But I think that for me counts towards what happened after Revolutions. This is things that were approved by the Wachowskis. He was picked by the Wachowskis to keep the story going. The death of Morpheus was something that he cleared with the Wachowskis. It wasn't something that they weren't aware of. They were part of approving that decision. Like I said, then once Chadwick stepped away and Rarebit was in control of the story, that's when it switches to, as he would call it, game canon. And I think that's fair. I think it's fair to say, that is something that is official to the game, but not necessarily official to the Matrix universe, because while the Wachowskis reserved veto power, I mean, they could have said, we don't want you to do this. At that point, because like I said, we were down to a skeleton crew. I mean, it's really unknown how much of that stuff they were even reviewing at that point. I mean, I definitely understand why he puts that label of game canon on his kind of era of story writing there. And then after that, in the podcast, we did discuss his notes where the story could have gone. But at that point, the servers were already unplugged and none of that stuff got produced. So he just considers those his notes, and those don't count as any kind of canon. So like I said, there's levels. You've got official canon, Chadwick canon, I call it, Rarebit canon or game canon, and then the game was over. So I think it's a two-pronged answer. I think it's a yes and a no. It was a yes then a no, but it's an experience I will always hold dear. I'm so happy to have been able to be a part of that experience. I mean, it's a big reason why I'm doing this channel now, to share that experience and just keep that energy going. That's why I was so excited when you hit me back when I first started this channel, and we kept running into each other in different Matrix spaces, and I'm like, this guy is everywhere when it comes to Matrix. And it's fun to be able to talk about it and share that experience with the people who love the Matrix as much as we do, but didn't get a chance to be there.
Yeah, it was kind of lightning in a bottle. It was a fun game. The story was actually really good. Even and we talked about this, and I think it was like chapter 4, 5, and 6 were the weak chapters, and once you get through to like chapter 8 and 9 and 10, you start thinking about those chapters a little differently. Starshore really remarked that this is changing everything that I thought about that particular storyline. So there are some good things in there. A lot of like the past of the Matrix, some very cool and interesting things that had to do with earlier versions of the Matrix. And it's detail that you can't get from the movies. Okay, they just don't have enough time to put this kind of detail in. I tell people in my discussions, like, the Wachowskis are not going to explain, they're not going to explain everything. They're not going to. I don't think that they'll clear up the argument about processing power or battery power. They're just going to tell their story. It's already established. We can sit here and talk about it and have fun, but they're just going to move on. They're going to go on to the story and not the details.
Yeah, I think anybody who's like looking for the Matrix 4 to clean everything up is setting themselves up for disappointment. But I got another really good question in the chat here. It says, "Do any oligarchs want to help humanity?" Because you were just talking about those late chapters, and the oligarchs we didn't get into in this discussion. But to answer that question specifically, I think it goes to the point I was just saying that that Rarebit kind of cleared up with the whole levels, because for me, even that storyline specifically, the oligarch storyline is actually the turning of the tide that I was talking about. Like, that is the point. That is the story where it changed. That story was started by Paul Chadwick, but finished by Rarebit. So to me, that is like the absolute gray area of, is something Matrix Online canon or not.
So I think that the things that were in the missions are canon, and I saved as many of those missions with the text as possible. So
Well, right. And you're the archivist, and you were, I was playing real time, but like back then, like, I was not into the oligarch storyline. As he mentioned, at that point, I was hardcore Huzu into the whole Terminator crossover thing. Like, I was deep in that role play. And I mean, obviously, we've talked about it. I've gone back and watched all the cinematics and read all the notes, and I'm aware of the oligarch thing. But I'll defer his question to you when he says, "Do any oligarchs want to help humanity?"
yes and no. They want to help themselves first, and they are and were humans. They don't particularly want to help Zion, and we don't really know the origin of the oligarchs. There's some speculation, but I mean, that's a yes and no answer. They want to help themselves. They are or were humans, and I think that oligarchs could possibly cross over because it kind of lends itself to like where we are going with technology in our world. What I'll refer to as, like, the real world, like where we live, our lives. The oligarchs are kind of where technology is going, and it would be interesting to see the Wachowski's take on it, and it would that would actually present it to me in a way that I could probably understand it better.
Yeah, I think that was a good answer. And what's interesting to me, that can go into the debate of, if the oligarchs at the point in which we meet them in the Matrix Online have android bodies, are they still human? I think that's something that we could debate. But yeah, they want to help themselves. So if you consider them humanity, then yeah, they want to help humanity in terms of helping themselves. But they are definitely not champions for Zion. I can tell you that.
So if I can articulate a little bit better, I think the things that were in the missions were official, and that stuff was written. The things that were acted out in real time in the events, there's a gray area. I think the broad strokes, and also these things will be adapted to the Matrix 4 or the cinematic universe. They're not going to be taken literally.
Yeah, as far as the Matrix 4, I don't think that it's going to get that deep. I don't think there's going to be an oligarch reference. Of course, December 22nd or whenever it does finally come out could, leave me to be wrong. But in the meantime, while we're speculating, I would not imagine that we're going to get that far into references. I personally think, the death of Morpheus might get referenced. There might be a couple of references, but I think that the oligarch storyline, I just think, is too deep in the Matrix Online lore to make a Matrix 4 appearance. But again, that's just my personal opinion. And I also agree with your point with the live events. I wouldn't, me personally, I wouldn't consider that stuff canon. And all of it wasn't documented, so we can't even really track all that. I'll put it again, it's levels to it. I put it a step above, the Liquid Huzu Terminator crossover backstory. Like I said, that's just straight fan fiction. That's fan art. But Lee Sig, that had a fan element to it. You know what I mean? It wasn't completely sanctioned as far as storyline either. So
Yeah, I think the Lasig characters and members got approval from Rarebit. So it was like, as long as you're operating in what I was approved for, and this is my interpretation because I wasn't in Lasig, as
Yeah, I
long as you
wasn't.
operate
I
under
wasn't
my
live
umbrella.
either.
Um,
So what so have we covered all the official Matrix Universe media? Are there any areas that we didn't touch on?
well, I think that's everything. Um,
Those
let
are
me do.
definitely major points. I mean, if I'm missing something.
Let me run a search real quick.
While you're running a search, I'll just do the quick summary. It's easier to say what we didn't consider canon for sure than to list everything that was canon. But basically, if as long as it wasn't a Peter Page Matrix comic or The Path of Neo, there's a good chance that it's still canon. And then we're 50-50, or like I said, Matrix Online is canon up to a certain point.
Yeah, I think that's everything. We got the comics, we got the games, we got the movies, we got the Animatrix.
All right. So I think we covered a lot in 2 hours here. I do thank you for sharing your knowledge here at Matrix University and helping power through this. I know it was a lot to cover all in one night, and we just kind of came in this on the freestyle tip. Like I said, the first night using live stream powered by StreamYard. So shout out to StreamYard for their free live stream software allowing this to happen. But yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything. Your any promotional handles or anything like that you want to share?
Well, you can follow me on YouTube here, Vesuvius MXO. You can just click on my name there. And I'm working on a video that I'm pretty excited about. Um, this should be out in about a week or so. This is going to actually be a comparison video of fighting styles in the Matrix, like those gravity defying moves, and combat athletes in real life who have done those moves. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, I forgot because I'm holding it right now. I have the official Matrix Online magazine.
The fanzine,
Is that what it was called?
it's got Morpheus on the cover and it says
Yeah.
Paul Chadwick.
Yep, and the Merovingian and an agent, Jack
Yeah.
in. Well, for anyone who missed it, I already did a whole live stream on that. There's only the one edition, but it doesn't have any Matrix Online, or rather, yeah, it doesn't have any like Matrix specific stories. It just talks about the Matrix Online. But because it has Paul Chadwick's name on the cover and a Q&A with him and an article written by him, I will go ahead and say it's canon with the exception of the timeline.
Yeah, so we have a couple of, other publications, but they're, the game guides and all that. And I don't think that there was much story in there except for that one timeline.
Yeah, I'll chalk the Enter the Matrix strategy guide as part of Enter the Matrix. But since you brought it up, it does have the universe poster in it, which again, I did a video specifically on that. And I think that's another good gauge to say if something is on that timeline, poster, then it's probably canon.
Well, thank you for having me. Loved it. Love talking Matrix.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for putting in all the work you have with archiving the Matrix Online. You're always my go-to when I have Matrix Online storyline questions or whenever I'm fuzzy about something or just want to bounce ideas. You're a well-respected mind in the quote-unquote Matrix community. So thanks for being here, man.
Can I do a call to action for the audience?
Of course, absolutely.
So on Twitter, I just posted a couple hours ago, almost like a petition to Daybreak Games, Warner Brothers, and the other companies that that helped create and publish the Matrix Online to re-release the Matrix Online leading up to the Matrix 4. You know, they had those billboards and the real ads that they could put in the city, and you know that could be a vehicle for promoting the Matrix 4 and giving us our game back.
Yeah, actually, I like all your stuff, so I liked it. But I'll go ahead and retweet that too. I thought that was a good idea. I mean, because gaming now is not what it was then. I mean, if they wanted to do another online run, it would be way more it would be way more successful. And with the mistakes that they made in the past, I'm sure they learned from. I'm sure they wouldn't have the same live event team, and that alone should be enough to help it run. So
Even if they gave it back to us as a sandbox and put some ads in there, I'd love it. And a lot of people are asking about it. You know,
yeah, I mean, after the 2077 launch, like they could make bank if they do it right. Like you know what I mean? Like the gaming platform or online gaming experience as a whole is completely different than it was in 2005. All right. Well, yeah, we've been on for over 2 hours, so thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for being here. Please do like the stream uh, on your way out if you haven't already. And we're going to go ahead and end this session. Class dismissed.